do want to throw up a comment here from Ryan Brock. Fantastic setting the edge on the stretch. I would agree that first run by Tyler Goodson, and I'm sure it was electric in that stadium, Don. That first run, and of course the pick six. But that run, it was a tremendous blocking, I thought, by I believe it was Nick DeYoung playing right tackle and Luke Lachey, the second tight end on the
Yeah,
depth.
that was what we call a soft corner. We got turned, and there was no confusion about where Tyler should run. We outflanked him, and their pursuit was not in very good position either. One of the things Bill Brazier always taught, he did a great job of this, and I have no doubt that Phil Parker does the same thing. Bill used to spend a lot of time being sure that all DBs understand the position they need on the football. And the reason I bring it up that way, somebody always at all times should have outside leverage on the ball. Or if they no longer have outside leverage, it's simply because the ball's on the boundary. But in general, if you're the defender that's supposed to maintain that outside leverage, your job is to be sure that that ball carrier has to turn back inside. And then of course, there are other DBs that fit over to the inside with inside leverage and then fit over the top of the play too. So if you can imagine good pursuit on the part of the DBs, you've got three DBs that basically surround the ball. You've got one with outside leverage, one with inside leverage, and then one that's fitting over the top. And our
And
guys do a good
so
job of that. That's why you see very few long runs.
and this was my big, and this kind of came out from Kirk Ferentz during his weekly press conference earlier this week, Don. And so it was after you and I previewed the game over the weekend of week 0. And he had talked about how he expected Iowa to employ basically 6 or 7 offensive linemen and rotate them in. And that,
Right.
for me, was a red flag. And maybe you're going to tell me as a coach, no, that's fine. I look at Kirk Ferentz's history as an offensive line guru, and I say he wants stability along that offensive line. And if we're rotating 6 or 7 guys, that's more of an indictment than a indication of depth. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's simply an indication. Here's what I used to tell my guys, especially before game 1, game 2. I would remind them 2 weeks ago in our staff meeting, you weren't even sure who was 1 and who was 2. Well, now you've made that decision. You've identified a starter. You have a backup. Let's not forget about the backup because 2 weeks ago you weren't sure who the best player was. Let's find out in a game who the best player is. Let's give that backup a chance. It's warm anyway. Now today heat wasn't an issue, but it might be an issue next weekend, or certainly the week after that too. So give those backups a chance to play. And the fact that Kirk made a statement before the game, we're going to play 7 or 8 guys, that told me, in Kirk's mind at least, that starting lineup's not set. There's a couple of guys that are in competition for that starting job. It's a fine line maybe between either one of them with how they've been playing. Now, obviously today maybe somebody moved ahead, maybe somebody faltered. I don't know, but you get that coaches are going to go over that video with a fine-tooth comb, and they're going to be able to identify who performed the best today. If they had doubt going into the game, they've got a better idea now coming out of the game.
And so looking at the rushing numbers, Goodson ended up with 109 on the ground, but again, 58 of those yards came on the one play. Ivory Kelly Martin,
You still there,
8
Corey? I
carries.
lost you, I think.
8
109, you
carries
said.
for, yeah,
What was
8
the
carries for Ivory
touchdown
Kelly
worth?
Martin.
What was the touchdown worth?
58 yards.
58.
Excuse me,
So,
56.
and Goodson's
56
total
yards.
was what again?
His total on the ground was 109.
109. So that's more than half the yards right there in one play.
Yeah,
So you
right.
take that away, and of course, thankfully we don't have to take it away. It's very much a part of the game. Got us rolling early, but obviously those other 53 rushing attempts weren't very. I'm sorry, the other 53 yards tied into
Yeah.
those other rushing attempts were not very productive.
So you could say 18 carries for 53 yards, which is, I don't have you're more of the mathematician. I guess I can do the math in my head, but that's under 3 a carry, correct?
That's 3.0 if you round it to the nearest
3.0.
tenth. Yeah.
Okay.
2.9 and change. Yeah.
And Ivory Kelly Martin did have 8 carries for 44 yards, 5.5 a carry. I thought he played
Thought
well.
he looked good in relief. Now the thing I don't know about comparing the two running backs, maybe Ivory Kelly Martin went against some twos. And he was still
Yeah.
inserted, of course, to play with the ones. I don't know who's in the game for Indiana. You got to believe Indiana doesn't want to be humiliated any more than necessary. So I can't imagine they were substituting a whole lot because, unless, of course, they are in that same situation of not knowing where the better player is.
So if you had to pick a standout offensively in this game, Don, would it be Sam Laporta? I thought he looked really rock solid. And
I
if
would
you
go with
take
Laporta.
away,
Yeah, he did
okay,
have a drop early. I think it was a pretty tough chance, as I recall, but it's a play that he would normally make. And there was a defender that had something to do with it, but the bottom line was a tough chance, as I recall, and I'm sure Sam would count it as a drop. I would certainly count it as a drop as an old tight end coach. But otherwise, not just productive in running around and catching a ball, but you know what I liked the best was yards after contact. He was fighting for extra yards. That's what first time I ever saw him scrimmage. After the scrimmage, I told him, I said, "You need to know this, Sam. I used to coach tight ends years ago. We had a number 84 that was an All-American. Maybe someday you can play as well as he did. I think that's a realistic goal for you. But just so you know, you reminded me of Mike Ditka out there. If you're a Bears fan, Sam, you reminded me of Mike Ditka. And you're not old enough to remember Mike Ditka, but your dad does. So
yeah.
I saw you when you caught the ball. You're looking to run down the field, but you're looking to run over people too. So you saw some of that today, of course. He's got a really good physicality about him. He doesn't want to believe for a second that the first guy's going to get him down. And that's what you want to see in a receiver, especially a tight end, of course, that has the size advantage over a lot of receivers that might be also trying to pull through certain tackles.
Now, if I'm wrong on this, and if I'm pushing the panic button way too early, you just let me know, Don. But I noticed some very, I don't want to say outlandish body language, but clearly frustration from Tyrone Tracy after that ball was underthrown to him. Is that bad to see that type of body language? I don't know if you saw it there from your vantage point at the stadium, but when that ball was underthrown, you can kind of see Tyrone Tracy put his hands on his head as if to just echo some of the frustration with Spencer's throw.
Yeah, you can understand the frustration that he has, but if I was his position coach, I would say, Tyrone, I understand you're frustrated, but we don't need to show that to the other team. We need to project that we're absolutely still united, and we haven't lost one bit of faith in our quarterback for his ability to get us the ball. We don't need to give them any reason for hope. They might logically think, well, there's a little bit of dissension there within the offense, and maybe we still have a chance to somehow pull this thing out. Obviously, that wasn't the case. The game is played out, but there's nothing to be gained. It's hard not to be frustrated and to show some of that. But as you become a more mature player, I would hope that wouldn't happen because there's nothing to be gained by it. You're frustrated, of course, but you don't have to let the world know that you're frustrated either. I'd rather you just keep that to yourself.
Don, we've got an Indiana fan who has a question for you. So Jackson Pittner says, I'm an IU fan. I went to the game. I'm sad. He goes on to say, I don't know if you guys are talking about Indiana, but can you talk about Penix? He looked awful, cost us the game. He didn't look good. I give a lot of credit to the Iowa defense, not just because we're an Iowa postgame show, but I do give a lot of credit to the back end of that defense. But what would be your evaluation for Indiana fans who are questioning the quarterback position after what we just saw?
Well, I would simply remind them, let's not forget that he's coming off of a knee reconstruction. I know it's been a while, but he hadn't played in a game. How many games did he miss at the end of the year? Two at least, maybe three. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
at least.
So think back. The last time he was 100% healthy was probably late October, I guess, almost a year ago, and a knee reconstruction or whatever the surgery was, pretty extensive surgery. It's hard to play with that same reckless abandon you had maybe before the knee injury. You can bet he was protected during the spring and during camp, and now all of a sudden he shows up and there's 70,000 people. Incidentally, I think one thing that worked in our favor today. Hats off to the fans. Fans did a great job. I don't think Indiana realized that crowd noise was going to be such a factor. I think a lot of people that come to Kinnick, if they've never played there, they have the mindset, it's only 70,000. How loud could it be? Well, I got news for them. It's about as loud as 100,000 in Happy Valley, or about as loud as 110,000 in the shoe. You know, it's loud, and the fans are into it. And I think Indiana got off to a rocky start in part because the quarterback spent a lot of time trying to change plays. And I don't doubt for a second that he was getting them into a better play, but I suspect there might have been one or more players that didn't get the call. There was some communication issues, I think, on the part of Indiana, especially in the first quarter. And you could see, I think the crowd sensed it too. Our crowd noise is bothering Indiana. Let's do an even better job with crowd noise in the next few snaps. And the crowd was into the game, of course, and I think the defense would tell you that gave them a boost to have Indiana have to operate with a lot of crowd noise.
And I thought, alluding to that, Don, earlier before you jumped on, I had made the statement that this was the epitome of how an atmosphere changes a game. Because, like you said, early on, I mean, to have obviously the touchdown from Goodson, and then you could just tell. I know that loud crowd noise also affects a home defense, right? But I mean, what we saw out of Penix, especially early, he just looked jittery. The play where he shoveled the ball forward, he lost it, and then he kind of shoveled it underhand forward. There was no receiver in the area, and I thought could have been called an illegal, well, not illegal forward pass, but I should say, I don't know what you'd call that, at least.
Well, I didn't hear
And of
very
course
well
it was not.
what the referee was saying, but as I saw the play unfold, there were people around me. Of course, a lot of fans thought it was a terrible call. I actually saw it as a proper call. The reason I identified it as a forward pass, he clearly possessed the ball, but only for a split second, and then he clearly shoveled the ball forward. I don't know if it was underhand maybe with his palms up, or maybe he flipped it more with his palms down. I'm not sure, but the bottom line is he clearly possessed it, if only for a split second, and then he clearly threw it across the line of scrimmage. And of course, he was out of the pocket. It went beyond the line. I think it was the correct call. It's the funniest looking throwaway you've ever seen, maybe.
It was, and I was questioning even on replay, watching it on television, whether or not he actually had possession of it, because it was so quick. And I thought, well, if he just bats it, that's not a pass. That's just batting a loose ball. But I think you're right. He did have that split second possession.
Yeah, they gave him credit. He didn't muff it at all. I think he caught it clean, and then he immediately got rid of it across the line. You could argue it was a heads-up play on his part, because I was pretty sure they were going to rule it as an incomplete pass. And after a lot of consternation, they came to that conclusion. Even though our fans didn't like it, they were pretty sure it looked like something illegal was going on, didn't it?
But it was the very next play, I believe, that the pass was, well, I should say dropped, because it really was. It should have been caught by DJ Matthews, who had slipped on his out route. It looked like there, I believe it was just a simple 5-and-out route, and went right in the hands of Riley Moss, and he returns it for a touchdown.
I didn't realize that was the very next play, but I guess you're right. That brings up a good point. Now, of course, that ball definitely should have been caught. It's clearly a muff. But the truth of it is, I think if you measured it, that ball looked like it had a lot of mustard on it. I think he threw it hard. And of course, if he just threw it a little, if the ball was going, I don't know how fast a football can go. If the ball was going 65 miles an hour, it would have been a little more catchable if it would have been 62 or 63. Just a little bit of pace off the ball. Still should have been caught. The other thing that comes to mind, I always talk to the quarterbacks. If the receiver's looking at you, I think it was an out route, not a stop route. Wasn't he actually running an out route?
Yeah. Yep.
I think the bottom line, keep the ball down. I always talked about the ball being chin level or lower, because if the ball's down into the frame of his body, if it is muffed, it's more likely to go to the ground.
Right.
If it's above his head and it's muffed, good chance it's going to be a pick, and it might even be a pick six, depending on where everybody else is.
I do want to run through some of the box score here for, I did promise that earlier in the show, and I didn't get to that, Don. So if you have anything to add here as I run through some of the defensive numbers.
Yeah, I'm going to be listening, because I've had difficulty pulling it up.
Okay, and I can forward you this email with the official box
score. I've got it now. I've got it through Indiana. I had trouble getting the good version of it through Iowa, but I've got it through Indiana.
So
Go
Seth
ahead.
Benson, I thought was particularly impressive. He was all over the field. Again, I made that comment about Jack Campbell and Seth Benson. Seth Benson ended up with 10 total tackles in this game. Jack Kerner, I thought, looked good. Noah Shannon looked good. I know a listener earlier commented on Justin Jacobs. And Dane Belton, how about those hands on that interception? Again, and your guy, number 13, Joe Evans, forcing that bad throw by Penix. It wasn't actually a terrible throw, but it was good coverage by Belton, and what a catch by a guy who's not a cornerback or a receiver, but is kind of a hybrid linebacker safety type of defender.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of people that stood out. I'm looking here. Sam had 5 catches for 83. That's a productive day, along at 24. I'm guessing on that 24-yarder, maybe 10 of it at least was yardage after contact. Frustrating day for Tyrone, 2 catches for 15. So I was a little surprised that we didn't make a greater effort to target him with the ball. But the bottom line is, as one of our listeners said, White House didn't catch many footballs. And of course, one of the things we were doing in protecting that lead, nothing wrong with shortening the game. I know going into the game, one of our primary goals was to outrush Indiana. And even though we didn't consistently gain 4 or 5 yards, we still did a good job. When we mixed in some short passes, we still were able to move the chains. 18 first downs versus their 11, I believe. Is that right? I think.
The number I saw, I believe, was 18-10, but you could be right.
I'll pull it up here in 1 second. 18-11 was the final.
Yeah, you are right. 18-11. Yeah.
But rushing yards, we outrushed them 2-1. We had more rushing attempts. That's important. These are all, you heard me talk about those top 15 parameters. The ones I'm mentioning are all among those top 15 parameters. Disappointing, 13 for 28, 5.2 per attempt. That's not good enough, obviously. We finished with 303 yards on 64 snaps. We did lose 2 fumbles, but of course we had the 3 picks. So we were +1, officially +1. Could have been +3 with a little bit of luck. A couple of the balls we had a chance at. Not easy plays to make. Here's a good stat for us in our favor. Penalty 11 for 67 for Indiana, 2 for 20 for us. That's significant.
Yes.
That's 47 yards difference in penalty yardage. And of course, 1 penalty can kill a drive. Even a 5-yard penalty, now all of a sudden, it's still first down, but now it's 1st and 15. That extra 5 yards is a burden to a lot of offense, and certainly it was a burden to Indiana today. Kicking game. Let's talk a little bit about the kicking game. Impressive for sure for Shudak. He's officially 2 for 2. The way I see it, he's 5 for 5.
That's what I said earlier. That's exactly what I said earlier,
all those timeouts went through, and I'm sure he enjoyed that challenge. And the kickoffs, my gosh, he kicked to the north into the end zone, turned around and kicked to the south into the end zone. It's not easy to kick the ball into the end zone, and oftentimes 4 or 5 yards into the end zone in both directions, because you think there'd be a wind effect somewhere. For what it was worth, I think the little effect there was out of the northwest. And that's one reason I think that the punting average, I'm pretty sure, is probably a little better punting to the south for both teams. Of course, our punter clearly out-punted their punter too. So good coverage, good kick returns. Charlie Jones, don't you love Charlie Jones? He hits it like you're supposed to. If he's going to bring it out, he's not going to be half-stepping. He is moving. He is moving. He's got his motor in high gear, and he's going to go with speed. He's going to make a move maybe, but it's going to be on the run. He's not going to be dancing. He's going to hit that with a lot of speed, and that's how you end up hitting home runs sometimes with those kick returns.